August 15th, 1944. On the plains of northern France, two spires dominate the horizon, the iconic silhouette of Chartres Cathedral. But for an American artillery officer with the advancing 22nd Corps, they are not a monument, they are a target. A fire mission has just been called in. US intelligence is certain. German spotters are using the 350-foot towers to direct lethal artillery fire onto his men. The military logic is brutal and absolute. To save American lives, the observation post must be destroyed. The guns are aimed. The choice is between protecting your soldiers or erasing an 800-year-old masterpiece of civilization. The order to fire is imminent. But that moment at the cathedral was only the visible edge of a much larger operational dilemma. The story of Chartres is often told as a simple legend of last-minute heroism. The documented reality is a far more ruthless story of military calculation, a brutal arithmetic of time, fuel, and lives during the pursuit across France. This raises a critical question. Why would General George S. Patton, a commander whose very motto was audacity, choose not to smash his way through a key objective? And how did this apparent delay become a decisive advantage? To understand that choice, you have to understand the unprecedented reality of late summer 1944. Following the breakout from Normandy, General Patton's Third Army was not just advancing, it was a torrent of steel flooding across the French countryside. Some armoured columns were covering 40, 50, even 60 miles in a single day, a pace unheard of in the history of warfare. This was the Great Sweep, a relentless pursuit designed to annihilate the retreating German forces. But this incredible speed had a hidden, crippling cost. The army's supply lines were stretched to the breaking point, a fragile logistical thread running hundreds of miles back to the beaches. Every Sherman tank, every half-track, every truck was consuming fuel at a ferocious rate. By mid-August, gasoline was becoming more precious than ammunition. This logistical shoestring was the Third Army's Achilles heel, and every commander knew that if the tanks ran dry, the Great Sweep would stop dead. The German command, though shattered, was not defeated. They understood the American vulnerability. Their strategy was to use France's ancient stone-built towns and cities as defensive breakwaters, fortified islands in the Allied flood. These hubs, controlling vital roads and railways, were meant to slow the American tide, to force costly street-by-street battles that would burn time and fuel. Chartres, 55 miles southwest of Paris, was the next major breakwater on the map. A protracted siege here would be a strategic disaster. It would halt the Third Army for days, perhaps a week, long enough for the bulk of the German 7th Army to escape the closing trap of the Falaise pocket. The initial American plan, driven by the need for speed, was exactly what the Germans were hoping for, a direct, head-on assault. The stage was set for a battle of attrition that Patton, for all his aggression, could not afford to fight. The order to neutralise the suspected German observation post lands on the desk of a 10th Corps staff officer. But Colonel Welborn Barton Griffith Jr is not just a soldier. In civilian life, he is an architect. The intelligence report feels wrong to him. Would the Germans really risk drawing massive fire to such an obvious, irreplaceable landmark? It's a tactical blunder he can't believe they'd make. Trusting his professional instinct over the official report, Griffith makes a decision that violates the chain of command and puts his life on the line. He will verify the target himself. With a single volunteer, he commandeers a jeep and speeds into the city, where German snipers are still active. They reach the cathedral and begin the long climb up the 378 steps of the North Tower. At the top, under the ancient bells, they find only dust. No Germans, no radios. Griffith scrambles to his radio. His message is frantic and clear. For God's sake, don't fire. The artillery stands down. A masterpiece is saved by a single act of courage. But this solves nothing for the Third Army. The German garrison still holds Chartres, and Patton's tanks are still burning fuel with every passing hour. While a single officer's defiance had saved the cathedral, it did nothing to solve the larger strategic problem. The German garrison in Chartres was still an anchor, dragging on the Third Army's advance. In the command tent of 20 Corps, the man tasked with pulling that anchor was Major General Walton Walker, a hard-driving Texan known as Patton's toughest son of a bitch. Walker stared at the map. The city of Chartres was a knot of roads, a critical junction that had to be untangled. The textbook solution was a frontal assault, but Walker's staff calculated the cost. It would mean days of brutal street fighting, heavy American casualties, and the destruction of the city. Most critically, it would burn through thousands of gallons of gasoline, stopping the armoured columns in their tracks. But as Walker's reconnaissance patrols and P-47s from the 19th Tactical Air Command fed him information, a different picture emerged. The Germans had fortified the main roads leading west and south into Chartres, just as expected. But the web of smaller, secondary farm roads that looped around the city to the north and east, they were almost entirely unguarded. A new, audacious possibility began to form in Walker's mind, one that had nothing to do with a head-on clash. At the same time, a new variable entered the equation. A formal message arrived from the préfet of the Eure-et-Loire department, a man named Jean Chadel. It was a carefully worded plea, requesting the American forces to declare Chartres an open city, to bypass it, sparing its historic treasures and its 23,000 civilians from the devastation of modern warfare. For Walker, this message was not the source of his new plan, but it was a powerful political justification. It offered a humanitarian and public relations victory to layer on top of a developing military gambit. Inside Chartres, the German commander, General Major Botho Elster, was preparing for a battle he believed was inevitable. Elster was a career logistics and administrative officer, not a frontline combat veteran. He had been given a combat command late in the war, and a motley force to go with it. A patchwork of infantry stragglers, Luftwaffe ground crews, and administrative troops. But his orders, flowing down from Hitler's headquarters, were absolute. Hold the fortress cities at all costs. Elster did his duty by the book. He had his engineers mine the main bridges over the Eure River. He placed his anti-tank guns and machine gun nests to cover the primary western and southern approaches. He was preparing for a bloody, head-on fight for the city, confident he could delay the Americans for several crucial days. He was playing a game of chess on a board the Americans were about to flip over. Walker took his plan to Patton. It was a gamble, but a calculated one. Don't attack Chartres. Instead, use a portion of the 5th Infantry Division as a screening force. Their job was to fix Elster's garrison in place, to make loud, aggressive demonstrations on the city's outskirts, convincing the Germans that a massive assault was imminent. Meanwhile, the real combat power of 10th Corps, the formidable 7th Armoured Division, and the rest of the 5th Infantry would execute a wide end run. They would slip north and east, using that neglected network of secondary roads to sweep around the city entirely. Patton, a commander who prized momentum above all else, grasped the operational brilliance instantly. An assault meant delay. A bypass meant speed. The order was given. The plan went into motion on August 16th. On the western edge of Chartres, elements of the 5th Infantry Division began their noisy demonstration. They exchanged small arms and artillery fire with Elster's outposts, creating the illusion of a probing attack before the main event. Elster's men returned fire, their attention locked on the threat they had been trained to expect. But miles away, a river of American steel was already flowing, unseen, into their rear. Soon, panicked reports began to filter into Elster's headquarters from German rear area commands. Entire American armoured columns were being spotted 10, then 15 miles east of Chartres, racing north towards the Seine River. They were in a place they were not supposed to be. The trap wasn't for the Americans at the gates of Chartres. The trap was now closing on Elster himself. The main body of 10th Corps was now past the city, leaving the German garrison isolated, confused, and fighting a phantom battle. The great American gamble was in full swing. This brilliant manoeuvre was not born from the préfet's plea or an architect's courage. Those stories, while powerful, obscure the brutal reality of the decision. The choice to bypass Chartres was an act of cold, unsentimental operational art, made by Walker and approved by Patton. The analysis was simple. The days that would be consumed in a street-by-street battle were strategically more valuable than the city itself. That time, purchased with gasoline instead of blood, would allow the Third Army to maintain its momentum, cross the next river barrier, the Seine, and help ensure the destruction of the German 7th Army. It was a trade, a city for the chance to break an army. But the bypass, while strategically sound, left a garrison of armed enemy soldiers sitting directly on the Third Army's vital supply line. For 2 days, the garrison in Chartres waited for a massive assault that never came. Then, on the morning of August 18th, the American screening force of the 5th Infantry Division finally moved in. The fight that General Major Elster had prepared for was a phantom. With his communications severed and his troops demoralized by the sight of an entire American army driving past them, the battle was short and one-sided. Realizing his position was not just untenable, but strategically irrelevant, Elster surrendered. Chartres was liberated with almost no damage. But the true impact of the bypass was unfolding miles away, on the maps at German High Command. Their entire defensive strategy west of Paris was built on a single critical assumption, that Chartres would tie up Patton's Third Army for at least a week. Instead, 10th Corps was already closing on the Seine River. The bypass wasn't just a successful tactic, it was a strategic coup that shattered the enemy's operational plan before it could even be executed. The gamble had paid off spectacularly. The city was free, the army was moving, and the enemy was in chaos. In the end, the spires of Chartres Cathedral remained untouched, a silent witness to the battle that never happened. But the survival of a monument is not the true legacy of this decision. The bypass of Chartres was a masterclass in 20th century warfare, proving that in the age of the tank and the airplane, the most effective way to defeat a fortress was not to smash it, but to render it strategically irrelevant. This reveals the true nature of Patton's command. It wasn't built on profane aggression, but on fostering a climate that rewarded initiative from below, like Colonel Griffith's, and embraced calculated operational brilliance from commanders like Walton Walker. The choice not to fight for Chartres was the entire Allied breakout across France in miniature. A victory won not by outfighting the enemy, but by outthinking them. What began as a costly delay, the refusal to smash through the defences of Chartres, became a decisive strategic advantage. In a final operational irony, the closed gates that seemed an obstacle simply pointed the way to the fastest road to Paris.